We are going to talk about very basic thing, which is called information architecture. And in the next few minutes, I will try to demystify a bit this subject. What is this thing, information architecture, all about, and what people are talking about when they say, information architecture. Of course, in our very specialized context, which is information architecture applied over the world of technical writing, software documentation. This is what we are going to look at, and this is what I will speak about. As to who am I, my name is Yordan Stanchev. I'm the lead instructor of JP Docu School of Technical Writing, where we try to teach people everything we know around the subject of technical writing, information architecture, data XML, all the useful and helpful skills you need to get started as technical writing professional. In my time outside this training company, I'm also a practitioner. I'm a user assistance development architect at SAP, where I also happen to lead our group of information architects for our data CMS environment. So what I'm going to share with you today is based on my practical experience with information architecture over, in any cases, in much more than 20 years in which I'm working in this field. So stay with us. I hope it will be interesting and relevant for you. Before I move on, just a remark, this session is being recorded. I will share the recording with you afterwards in our Facebook group. During the session, feel free to post your questions in the chat or just unmute yourself and speak up. And of course, as usual, I'll do my best to try to address any questions you might have. We have very limited time. Our meeting will stop at 8 o'clock sharp, I believe. Zoom will kick us out most probably. So I'll try to stay focused and kind of walk you through this particular subject and show you, of course, examples. First of all, after discussing what is this thing called information architecture, I will show you two particular examples, one from Zoom and one from the SAP world. And with these examples, try to better explain to you what is this thing, information architecture. And I will also do my best to show you a little bit and give you a hint as to what you need to know in order to build your information architecture. So this is what we have to cover today. Now, without further ado, let's deep dive and jump in directly to the subject. First of all, as always, we need some definition. Or what is this thing called information architecture all about, and what is it for real? Now, the first thing you should remember is that information architecture overall is a much broader discipline. It is, nobody ever thought about information architecture and said, oh, let's do that for the technical writers. No, it's not like this. Information architecture is something very generic. So every time you research information related to this subject, be careful what is the source that you're looking at, or what kind of information architecture is your information source talking about. So the first definition that you see here comes from Adobe, and it is more towards the world of UX, user experience. There they would define information architecture as a discipline that focuses on organization of the information within digital products. Again, remember, our focus here is on software documentation, the world of software, and what happens there on the web when we speak about digital software products in particular. And Adobe just moves on to give us an example. when designers create software applications and website, they organize their screens in a way so that users can easily find the information they need. Now, when you speak about information architecture, 80% of the people you talk to will have exactly this in mind when you say these words, information architecture. How to structure and organize the information on a given website, or if they are a little bit more advanced, within a particular software application, which again, in many cases is also running on some website, right? But this is what people imagine, and this is what information architecture is all about. Now, this is not exactly what we have to deal with when we speak about software documentation. You know, we are not website developers here and application developers. So let's try to narrow it down to what we do in the world of software documentation and technical communications in particular. I find also this definition from ClickHelp, which is another vendor for software for documentation. I think they also nailed it just right. You know, information architecture as the organization and structure of documentation that allows readers to use it most efficiently. You know, this is getting much closer now. Very often I found out that people in our field, technical writers, they tend to focus very much on the documentation creation, development process, and rarely they ask themselves one very, very, very important question. Is your customer ever going to find the documentation you have written? One of the things that I always kind of enjoy challenging technical communicators is to ask them this question, you know, what is the use of the best possible documentation you can ever imagine if your customer is not able to find it and use it in the moment they need? Just think about it for a second. We are all here people who deal with technical writing. We provide documentation that is meant to help our users. But if you do not work on your information architecture or the way that will let the customers access, find, use your documentation, in the end, what is the use of your documentation if nobody ever reads that? So think about it for a second. And moving on to the last definition, the definition that I would give here, I would say that information architecture is a combination of two things. It's a little bit of an art and it's a little bit of a science, which you apply to consistently structure and organize information in a way that eases the navigation to and through your content. So you can help your users access the information they need when they need it in the format that they want. If you ask me for a definition around information architecture applied in the world of technical communications, that would be it. And remember, this is something that you have to actively and consistently apply, structure and organize of information. Pay attention also to the fact that I'm not saying explicitly documentation. It's any forms of information that we deliver to assist, to help our users, including the software documentation that we write. Now, again, from experience, I know that people who just listen to definitions, and first of all, thanks for being patient and listening to the end of the definitions. Very often you misunderstand it or you're not sure what we are talking about. So unless you have a question on the definition, let me check the chat. Nothing in the chat yet. Let's move on and take a look at two particular examples. I have prepared a starting sample, which is based on the Zoom, the software that we are using for this call right now. So I automatically assume you already kind of know at least a little bit the tune because you've managed to dial in into the session, right? You already kind of know it. But let's take a look at their website and understand what is this Think Information Architecture all about, starting there with Zoom. So here is the link to the documentation that they're providing. I will put it also directly here in the chat in case you want to open it yourself. Now, right now, as a first step, I want you to look at this page holistically. You completely forget about what's written on it right now, but let's just take a look at the page itself. First of all, what is this page that we see? It is a website. It comes with, on the top left-hand side, it comes with the Zoom logo, which is used as some sort of landing page. I will not click on it. We are already on their support, so you can easily say that this is the Zoom support page. And right there, you have navigation that leads to their solutions, the things that they're offering, their plans, pricing, contact, sales. And on the right-hand side, you can directly start a Zoom meeting, host a meeting, or sign in to Zoom. Now, on the next level of the navigation of this page, we see their product support, support by different topics, community, developers, learning center, primary support, and contact for support, and a search. Looking down on this page, you see 4 high-level pieces of navigation: download and install, setup, use and learn, and troubleshoot. I guess you've already spotted that the documentation, the software documentation, the software guides are here under the use and learn. Let's not jump directly into that yet, but let's analyze what we saw right now. I walked you on a very high level through the website that Zoom has developed for their kind of support organization. This is part of their information architecture. What do I mean by that? On the one hand side, you have in front of you a website, a web page, and on this web page, there are different ways to navigate through the content, all of the parts that we looked at here, or you can directly search to get to some content. Now, why is this important for us? It tries to address 2 particular items related to information architecture. If I'm a user who just lands on this web page, what would this page tell me to guide me through the content that is stored on this page? They've done some work. First of all, this first level navigation, which is kind of quite standard with the Zoom support, solutions, and direct access to joining or hosting a meeting, because obviously these are like the standard normal things I want to do with this product, the Zoom products, right? But then on the next level of their navigation, they're showing me navigations, product support, and there I'm navigated to specific items of their product support. Support by topic, again, take a look, it's again the subject of supporting the end user, but this time organized by different, as they call them, topics: get started, account management, and so on and so forth. I have a community access, so if I want to chat with somebody or post a question, I can go to community. Or if I'm a developer, I may want to look at their development information. The Learning Center is also present, where usually we provide content like getting started information, like instructional videos, trainings, tutorials, whatever they have prepared and delivered for us. But take a look also down on this page. I really like also this element of what they did. These are like 4 very high level aspects of probably the Zoom customer's journey. In order to get started with this tool, you obviously have to do what? Download and install it. If you have already downloaded and installed it, how do you set it up? Like these one-time initial things to get you started are already present. And now that it's set up, how do you use this particular piece of software? This is a good example of how they organize their overall information architecture by identifying specific moments in time in which you need information. If I'm a brand new user, what is my first starting point? You need to download and install. But if I'm an existing user, I don't care about the download, the setup, troubleshoot. I just want to use your software. And there, now they introduce me to the corresponding documentation or additional information that will help me use this software. This is what the information architecture was all about, how I can get in an efficient manner as fast as possible to the information that I want to consume, no matter who am I as an end user at this moment. For you as technical writers, you can think about it backwards. If I am the technical writer who produced the documentation, let's say I wrote this getting started on Windows and Mac OS. Your starting point is exactly the opposite. You have a guide, you need to deliver it to the customer. Where should you deliver this guide to the customer? How would people find it? And if you have a corresponding website where you deliver and host your content, the way you structure and organize these guides, this information is going to be essential for your information architecture. Should I put my guide here under use and learn? Should I put it under download and install? These are questions that you need to address as technical writers, and this way figure out the overall, the holistic information architecture for your content. I will quickly show you another example, which in my opinion is much bigger, much larger in terms of volume. This is one of the many products we have at SAP. And this one is a very technical product. It's a business technology platform. How is this content organized here? Okay, before I move on, I see something in the chat. There's a question. How do the job requirements list information architecture related knowledge or experience? Okay, I'll try to address that in a few minutes. Okay, thanks for the question, Saba. Okay, let's move back to the example before I jump into your questions. Now, on this page again, what you will find is only content related to the documentation. Again, when you click on these links, you will end up on different user guides which explain what is this product all about, how to use it, and so on and so forth, right? So you as technical writers most probably are some of the people who just write this documentation. And for those of you who are curious, yes, this is documentation which is written in DITA and then produced into this particular output. But my point here is towards the overall information architecture. The information architecture of this website is again organized in a similar fashion to what you saw before. The standard navigation that kind of confirms you are at the right company, at the right product, in the right place. Then the search, which allows you to directly search through the content that is provided here, and then different phases in which you might be right now. You want to discover the product, you want to operate this product, you want to develop on top of it, you want to have learning and certification information. And only then, underneath those different categories, you will find the documentation. So this is what information architecture is all about. It's not only that you have to, just I wrote the documentation and that's it. It's also what happens with this documentation later. When you deploy it and when you bring it into the hands of your customers, how are they going to find this information? Now, in order to figure out these particular aspects, how to come up with the information architecture, there are, of course, plenty of things to consider. But here's my super short recipe for you. Customers first. What do I mean by that? Think about the customer. Stop thinking about the documentation. You have not written the documentation because you enjoy writing documentation, I hope. You wrote documentation with the intention to help and serve your users, your customers. So ask them what they want. Do they want their written documentation, video instructions, just embedded information directly in the software? This is the first thing that will influence your information architecture decisions. What is the format that your customers want? Printable formats like PDFs or completely online experience, maybe HTML5 output? What devices do they use? Depending on the software you have, this can be completely different answer, or all of them. Do they use mobiles? Do they have large desktop screens, or they have some special device on which they look at your software and have to consume there the documentation? This will influence how large chunks of information you would put, how you would structure it and organize it. How is this information going to be found? You have two aspects at least. Is the documentation searchable and you rely on a search like a Google search, which is like 90% of the cases, or you have to have an excellent navigation experience. Once they are on the website, how do they get to your documentation? These are two sometimes very different aspects that you need to play around with when deciding on information architecture. How is this information that you have to provide going to be presented, referenced, and structured? Another way to phrase it, do you have a defined taxonomy and ontology relations between the entities inside this taxonomy? What is the terminology that you use throughout your content? And does this terminology match the terms that your customers are going to use or expect on your website? As you can suspect already, actually information architecture is a pretty large territory. So in these 30 minutes, I just gave you a little clue as to what information architecture is all about. And because in previous sessions, you've been asking me, are there related courses about that? I do have such a course already. It's trying to cover exactly those basics of information architecture and user experience for you as technical writers. So if you're curious, I will share here the link to this subject. But now let's use the remaining 5 minutes to take a look at any questions you might have. And the first question I see here is, how do the job requirements ads list information architecture related knowledge or experience? Now, first of all, remember that if you just search for the work and the job of information architect, it's a rare case. Actually, information architecture is more something that you do, something that you practice. Only in very large companies you will see people who deal solely with information architecture. Usually this is a common kind of terminology, information architect, that you will hear applied to UX writers, user experience people, to people especially who deal with data XML writing, because there's a huge field around information architecture. And Also people dealing with taxonomies and metadata who have to build knowledge base, for example. So do not just search for information architecture in the job advertisements, search for expected knowledge around search, navigation through content. Remember those keywords I gave you here on this slide? You know, anything related to the overall user experience, how people browse through content, how do they navigate to your information. Very often it's not specialized around software documentation. Usually in a job art, they will come up from search, navigation, organizing in a consistent and logical way the information on a website. And then only the specific area in which this website resides will give you the clue, are we talking about documentation? Yeah, I guess it is far more complicated question and far more complicated answer than what you were hoping for. It's not that straightforward. Usually this is something that you do as a user experience designer, as a technical writer. Should you have any further questions, use the Facebook group or send me a mail. I'll be happy to take them. And I suggest for this evening, we stop here. Thanks a million for joining again the session, and I'm looking forward to our next meetings and any questions I can help you with. Thank you.